the CEO of SpaceX and the owner of the boring company Neuralink and Twitter. Please join me in welcoming Elon Musk. Well, a lot has happened at Tesla over the last few years, and it's a whole lot of growth. And so you look back over these last 8 years since we chatted with you last, is faster or slower adoption than you expected? Any big surprises that you weren't expecting?
Well, it's actually gone reasonably close to what I thought would happen, which is from that point, roughly a 50% year-over-year compound annual growth, which is compliments the Tesla team. It's the fastest growing large manufactured object ever. Which I think the second is like the Model T back in the day, so about 100 years ago. So the Tesla team are very proud to work with them. They've executed incredibly well, and we anticipate something close to 50% growth to continue. That is very exciting, and it means that we should expect electrification of transport, especially passenger vehicles, quite quickly. Because the normal human instinct is to extrapolate on a linear basis, but really, if you look at the curves, electric vehicles are growing exponentially. So I think that's great news for those in the room. You have a lot of customers. Well, you have a lot of EV customers already, and soon you'll have many more. I sometimes ask, well, when will EVs be most of the cars? The important thing to remember is that you've got 2 billion cars and trucks out there. So, and about 100 million per year new vehicle production, which kind of makes sense. There's sort of a life of about 20 years before a vehicle finally goes to the scrapyard. So even if 100% of electric vehicles were, our new vehicle production was electric today, it would still take 20 years to replace the fleet. So just important to bear that in mind. Percentage of new vehicle production versus total fleet. But I think we're moving quickly to the point where probably half of all new vehicles made will be electric, and I think that's likely to happen. I think before the end of this decade. But then there's still call it another 20 years beyond that before the fleet really becomes majority EV.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as we've done the analysis for California, right, we have an executive order that calls for all new vehicle sales being zero emission by 2035.
Yeah. I mean, I think the larger point is that demand for electricity is going to be extremely high.
Yeah.
So I hope this is good news. If you just do the rough back of the envelope math, you need to roughly triple electricity to get to a fully electric economy. Roughly a third of power is electric, and then these are very rough numbers. Roughly a third is spent in transportation of various kinds with fossil fuels or hydrocarbons, and then roughly a third is heating. Even assuming the sort of current economic usage, electricity per capita being constant, you're looking at roughly a tripling of electricity demand. And so it's really going to take a tremendous effort to address this demand. This is sort of, I think, very good news for those producing electricity, but also entails a tremendous amount of work ahead in new production capacity and production capacity that is as sustainable as possible.
Well, I mean, in fact, it requires a whole system to be ramping up. It's you are dealing with the storage side and the vehicle side and the charging side, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll get back to the electric vehicle side in a minute, but I remember when you and I spoke a number of years ago, you already had that vision of global electrification.
Yeah.
And I think you've positioned your company, right, with storage piece, with solar, so this integrated view of where the market is going and how Tesla fits into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's fundamentally 3 pillars to a sustainable energy future. One is sustainable energy generation, which is solar, wind, hydro. I'm actually, a fan of nuclear, good old fission. I think it's underrated.
I agree.
I mean, we could easily supply all of the world's electricity with fission, but people, I don't know, sometimes their understanding of physics is not amazing, and so they get scared of things they shouldn't be scared of. So I'm very much pro. Anyway, so basically, any electricity where you can say, okay, this is not going to meaningfully change the chemistry of the climate and oceans, the atmospheric oceans. And so, anyway, so you've got sustainable electricity generation on one side, then you've got stationary batteries as the second pillar, which is needed for any kind of intermittent electricity production. And by its nature, solar and wind are intermittent. So batteries and solar and wind go together extremely well. And then the third pillar is electric transport.
Mhm.
So get all three of those pillars going, and we have a sustainable future as long as the sun shines and the wind blows, which is going to be a long time.
Well, I think this idea of having a balance across these resources, it takes a lot of tools in the toolbox. Let me get back to electric vehicles, though, because I'd love to go a couple levels deeper here.
Sure.
We're talking a few minutes ago. I think that was more on passenger vehicles. But let's talk a bit about bigger ones. So, we're all excited to see the first Tesla semi-trucks on the road in California. And that means a lot in terms of the viability of trucking systems in the future. You also have the US EPA, proposed vehicle standards that could accelerate the medium and heavy duty electrification. You have
Yes.
California doing its thing as well as a number of other states. But ultimately, the vehicles need to be economical for fleet operators.
Yes.
And particularly in Southern California, where we have all the traffic coming up from the ports, a lot of those truck operators are not big fleets, right? They're small mom and pop owners. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so how quickly are you thinking that freight movement really goes electric and in a way that's affordable so that you can really serve that mix of owners out there?
Yeah, well, I think I'd certainly encourage people to look at our semi-truck presentations because, in fact, one of the things we emphasize with an electric semi-truck is that it's much more energy efficient than a diesel truck. And I mean, you get things like regenerative braking.
And we were talking earlier in our board meeting about just the
Case
efficiency of
closed,
electric.
QED.
It's efficiency of electric technologies, right?
Yes.
So it's a big part of the story here.
Yeah, just fundamentally, combustion engines in a vehicle are constrained in mass and volume.
Mhm.
So you're therefore limited in how much useful energy you can extract from a fuel when you have a very constrained mass and volume for the truck. Whereas a power plant does not have the constraints of mass and volume. It can be heavier and bigger, obviously, and you can take the waste heat and run a steam turbine.
Mhm.
So your sort of Carnot efficiency
Right.
of a power plant is dramatically greater than if it's burned in a mobile application like a vehicle. And even when taking into account transmission losses and charging losses, they still don't account for the massive difference in efficiency of even hydrocarbons being burnt at a power plant versus being used in a car.
Which sets up thinking about, well, what's a transition there? But ultimately, though, we're looking at a future that's electric. So we all agree on the efficiency of the trucks. Let me state something that's plainly obvious: bigger and more trucks, bigger and more batteries, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and actually, I apologize.
Yeah,
I didn't properly answer your question with respect to trucks because so semi-trucks, because they do use a large battery,
Mhm.
will be later than other vehicles because we need to have sufficient battery supply in order to have a battery that's maybe 4 or 5 times larger than would be in a passenger car in a semi-truck. That's the reason why we haven't gone to scale production of semi-truck yet, is because there just weren't enough batteries.
Mhm.
Now, as the battery problem is solved, we will go to volume production with the semi-truck, and I'm pretty sure Tesla will be first on this, but we're expecting to reach volume production probably sometime end of next year is what we're aiming for. And again, it's not going to be overnight all the trucks become electric because you have to reach a certain percentage of new semi-trucks built, then replace the fleet. The fleet is at least 10 years old in the semi-truck case, and so but I think it probably gets to 50% of new semi-trucks built within probably 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, and then it's another 10, 15 years before you see most trucks be electric. So that's, I don't know, depending on your perspective, that's either really soon or far away.
Or a little bit of both, right?
Yeah, yeah.